Give me an heir." The words fell across the royal council chamber so calmly that Claire Bennet almost dropped the tiny wolf pup in her arms. For one impossible second, she assumed King Nathaniel Blackwood had spoken to someone else. There were 12 noble women standing beneath the silver banners of Blackwood, each dressed for the succession presentation, each carefully chosen by families eager to place a daughter beside the throne. Claire was not one of them. She was kneeling near the far wall in a plain blue healer's dress, wrapping a soft bandage around the paw of a frightened pup that had wandered into the chamber before the meeting began. Yet when she looked up, the Alpha King's gray eyes were fixed directly on her. "I'm sorry," Claire said. "Were you talking to me?" A few counselors shifted uncomfortably. No one asked Nathaniel Blackwood to repeat himself. At 39, he had ruled the Northern Territories for nearly 15 years, and everything about him seemed designed to discourage foolish questions. He stood well over 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered beneath a charcoal suit. His dark hair touched faintly with silver at the temples. He did not need a crown to look like a king. Claire suspected he could have worn gardening gloves and still made half the room sit straighter. "Yes," Nathaniel said. Claire stared at him. "That is an unusually direct introduction." Somewhere behind her, someone coughed to hide a laugh. Nathaniel's expression barely changed, but something almost amused flickered in his eyes. "Almost. The blood moon is 6 weeks away," Lord Harrow explained quickly. "His Majesty must secure the succession before then." Claire glanced toward the 12 women who had actually been invited for that purpose. "And your solution is the healer holding a puppy?" The pup chose that moment to lick her wrist. Nathaniel looked at the small creature, then back at Claire. "It trusted you. That is generally considered a poor qualification for running a kingdom." "Perhaps," he said, "but it is better than most qualifications I've heard today." Silence followed. Claire slowly rose, keeping the pup tucked safely against her chest. She should have been intimidated. Everyone else certainly was. But beneath Nathaniel's authority, she noticed something unexpected: exhaustion. Not weakness. Never that. Just the weariness of a man who had spent years being treated like a throne instead of a person. "Before I accidentally agree to something historic," Claire said carefully, "what exactly are you asking?" Nathaniel stepped down from the raised platform. He stopped several feet away, giving her space. "I need a Luna. The kingdom needs an heir. I am asking you to consider becoming both." Claire's heart gave one hard, startled beat. Beneath her sleeve, warmth suddenly spread across her wrist. She froze. The silver crescent-shaped mark she had hidden since childhood was glowing against her pale skin. She quickly pulled her cuff lower before anyone could see it. Anyone except Nathaniel. His gaze dropped for the briefest second, then returned to her face. And Claire understood, with a cold little twist of certainty, that the Alpha King had noticed something she had spent 27 years keeping secret. Claire kept her wrist hidden beneath the cuff of her blue healer's dress, while the council chamber seemed to hold its breath around her. Nathaniel had seen the silver glow. She was certain of it. Yet the Alpha King did not expose her secret. Instead, he turned toward the council and said, "Clear the room." Lord Harrow blinked. "Your Majesty, the candidates are still waiting." Nathaniel glanced toward the 12 noble women. "Then they may continue waiting somewhere else." Within minutes, Claire stood alone with him near the tall windows overlooking the pine-covered hills beyond Blackwood Palace. The little wolf pup had been carried safely back to the royal kennels, leaving Claire with nothing to hold except her composure. Nathaniel rested one hand against the back of a chair. "You looked frightened." "I was surprised. Those are not the same thing." Claire met his eyes. Neither is proposing marriage and requesting an heir in the same breath. For the first time, Nathaniel almost smiled. "I was told efficiency was one of my better qualities." "Whoever told you that was afraid of you?" His eyebrow lifted. Claire immediately wondered whether challenging the most powerful man in the Northern Territories was wise. Then Nathaniel gave a quiet laugh. It was brief, rough with disuse, but real. The sound startled her more than his proposal had. "You are not afraid of me," he said. "I did not say that. You implied everyone else was." "That was observation, not courage." He motioned toward the long table. A document waited there beneath the royal seal. Claire approached carefully. The agreement offered protection for her family, permanent funding for the healers of her home district, and the formal title of Luna upon marriage. In return, she would stand beside Nathaniel as queen and help secure the future of the Blackwood line. Everything was written neatly, legally, coldly. Claire set the document down. No. Nathaniel stared at her. No, not like this. She pulled a blank sheet of paper toward herself. If you want me to consider marrying you, I have conditions. Something sharpened in his expression, though it looked more like curiosity than anger. Go on. Claire began writing. I continue working as a healer. I keep my own room unless I choose otherwise. You do not decide what I eat, what I wear, or where I go inside the palace. Nathaniel folded his arms. Anything else? Claire thought for a moment. You knock before entering my room. He looked offended. I know how doors work. Kings often forget. That almost smile returned. Fine. She slid the paper toward him. Nathaniel read every line, then signed his name without hesitation. Claire blinked. That was easier than expected. He picked up the pen again. I have one condition. Her stomach tightened. Nathaniel wrote a single sentence beneath hers. Claire read it aloud. Dinner together every evening. If I am expected to marry a woman, he said, I would prefer to know her. The simplicity of it disarmed her. She looked up and found no command in his face now. Only a man trying, perhaps badly, to turn obligation into something human. Then his eyes flicked toward her covered wrist. And Claire. Her pulse stumbled. Yes. Nathaniel's voice softened. Whatever you are hiding, I will wait until you choose to tell me. By the third evening, Claire had learned that Nathaniel Blackwood was terrible at courting. Not cruel, not careless, simply terrible. His first attempt arrived before breakfast in the form of 24 white roses, 12 red roses, and a potted lemon tree that required 2 servants to carry through her doorway. Claire stared at the small tree for several seconds before looking at the nervous footman. Did His Majesty send flowers? Or is he slowly relocating the royal garden into my room? The footman pressed his lips together, clearly fighting a smile. At dinner, Claire brought it up immediately. The lemon tree was ambitious. Nathaniel paused with his fork halfway to his plate. You did not like it. I did not say that. Good. I said it was ambitious. He considered this as seriously as if she had questioned a military treaty. The florist said citrus symbolizes prosperity. The florist saw a king with too much money. Nathaniel looked offended for exactly 2 seconds before the corner of his mouth moved. Claire had begun to recognize that expression. It meant he was trying not to laugh. Their dinners became the strangest part of her day and, somehow, the part she started anticipating most. He asked about her work. She asked why royal dining tables needed to be long enough to seat 30 people when only 2 were eating. He admitted he hated formal banquets. She admitted she hated people who pretended not to be hungry at formal banquets. By the end of the week, their conversations had stopped feeling like negotiations. The public courtship was less successful. Nathaniel took her riding because someone had apparently told him women enjoyed scenic horseback outings. Claire did enjoy riding. She did not enjoy spending 3 hours following him through cold mountain trails while he tried to explain historic border markers. This is your idea of romance? She asked as their horses walked beside a creek. Nathaniel glanced over. There is a waterfall 2 miles ahead. Does it have legal significance? No. Then there is still hope for you. He laughed, openly this time, and the sound warmed something inside her that she did not want to examine too closely. Later, while returning through the village outside the palace gates, Claire saw Nathaniel stop beside a group of children playing near a bakery. He knew every name. He asked one boy about his reading lessons and reminded a little girl that her mother had promised to send him drawings for his office. There was no audience worth impressing, no council watching, no advantage to gain. He was simply kind when no one important was looking. Claire studied him from several feet away, suddenly aware that the stories about the distant Alpha King had never mentioned this version of him. That night, back in her room, she removed her gloves and reached for the pitcher beside her bed. A pale silver light moved across her wrist. Claire froze. The crescent mark was brighter than before. Not faint, not sleeping. Awake. Her heart began to race as she covered it with her other hand. Moonveil marks did not change without reason. Her grandmother had told her that years ago. They responded only when something ancient recognized something true. Claire looked toward the window, where the lights of Nathaniel's wing glowed across the courtyard. Then, despite herself, she remembered his laugh beside the creek. The silver mark brightened again. : Writing variant equals document ID equals 86124. The wedding was scheduled for the following Friday, which gave Claire exactly 6 days to decide whether she was brave, foolish, or simply too curious about Nathaniel Blackwood to walk away. By sunrise, the palace had transformed into a storm of flowers, silver ribbons, formal invitations, and people asking Claire questions she had never expected to answer. White roses or winter lilies? Silver silk or ivory? 800 guests or 1,200? Claire finally looked at the royal event planner and said, "Is there an option where we quietly get married behind the kitchen?" The woman looked horrified. Nathaniel, standing beside the window, looked delighted. "I asked the same thing." Claire turned toward him. "You did?" Lord Harrow said it would cause a constitutional incident. "I am beginning to like Lord Harrow less every day." On the night of the ceremony, moonlight poured through the open arches of Blackwood Temple, painting the stone floor silver. Claire stood beneath the ancient oak beams in a simple ivory gown, her dark hair pinned loosely behind her shoulders. Hundreds of candles glowed around the gathered court, but she barely noticed them when Nathaniel approached. He wore black formal robes edged with silver, his expression calm, though she had learned enough about him to recognize the tension hidden in the set of his shoulders. For once, he did not look like the alpha king everyone feared disappointing. He looked like a man hoping not to disappoint one woman. The elder began the traditional vows. Claire knew what came next. The old words required a Luna to promise obedience to crown, bloodline, and mate. Before the elder could speak them, Nathaniel raised one hand. "We will use different vows." A murmur moved through the temple. Claire stared at him. Nathaniel ignored everyone else. His eyes remained on hers. "Claire Bennett, I will protect your freedom as carefully as I protect this kingdom. I will never ask from you what you are not willing to give. Whatever comes after tonight, you will stand beside me because you choose to, not because I command it." For several heartbeats, Claire forgot how to breathe. The silver mark beneath her glove warmed. "That was not in the rehearsal," she whispered. The rehearsal needed improvement. Her smile escaped before she could stop it. "You are learning." Slowly, when Claire gave her own vow, the words came easier than she expected. Not because she understood what their marriage would become, but because Nathaniel had just given her something more valuable than certainty. Choice. Hours later, after the celebrations faded, Claire stood outside the rooms prepared for them, suddenly nervous again. Nathaniel handed her a small brass key. "Your room is on the left. Mine is across the hall." She blinked. "Across the hall? I remember the contract. You actually read it?" He looked offended. "I am a king, Claire, not an irresponsible landlord." She laughed so suddenly that a passing servant nearly dropped a tray. Instead of separating immediately, they carried 2 cups of tea onto the balcony overlooking the moonlit valley. They talked until the palace grew silent. Claire told him about learning medicine from her grandmother. Nathaniel admitted he once hid from a diplomatic banquet inside a library for 3 hours. Somewhere between midnight and morning, Claire rested her head against the chair and fell asleep. When she woke, briefly, a warm blanket covered her shoulders. Nathaniel sat several feet away, reading quietly beneath the lantern light. He had kept his promise. He had asked for nothing. Beneath the blanket, unseen by him, Claire's silver crescent mark began to glow brighter than ever before. The silence after Adrian spoke felt heavier than the music that had filled the banquet hall only moments before. Evelyn kept her hands folded carefully in her lap, aware of every curious glance moving toward her across the long table. She had spent years learning how to disappear when powerful people judged her. Tonight, disappearing was impossible. Lord Varick, one of Blackthorn's oldest council members, slowly set down his glass. "Your Majesty, surely the treaty delegation understands that royal hospitality does not change rank." His words were polite, but Evelyn heard what lived beneath them. She lowered her eyes before anyone could see the familiar sting there. Adrian did not. "No crown can decide her worth," he said quietly. The room became still. Varick shifted in his chair. "I meant no insult." "Then choose words that require no apology." Adrian's voice never rose. Somehow that made the warning stronger. Evelyn looked at him despite herself. He was not watching the councilman anymore. His silver eyes had returned to her, calm and unreadable, as though the entire crowded hall had faded beyond the space between them. A servant approached with the next course, visibly nervous beneath the attention of so many nobles. His hand shook as he placed a dish near Evelyn, and a silver spoon slipped onto the floor. Several guests glanced over with irritation. Evelyn immediately bent to retrieve it, but Adrian moved first. He picked up the spoon and handed it back to the young servant without ceremony. "You are fine," he said. The servant stared at him in astonishment before bowing deeply. Something inside Evelyn softened. Kings were supposed to notice armies, borders, alliances. Adrian noticed frightened servants. That small kindness unsettled her more than his power did. Across the table, Lady Celestine smiled without warmth. "Blackthorn has become unusually forgiving tonight." Evelyn felt the old instinct to become smaller. Then she remembered the servant's relieved face. "Kindness is not the same as weakness," she said softly. A few conversations stopped. Celestine raised one elegant eyebrow. Evelyn immediately wondered whether she had spoken too boldly, but Adrian's expression changed almost imperceptibly. Not surprise. Approval. "Exactly," he said. The single word carried across the table. No one challenged her again. The banquet slowly resumed, though Evelyn could feel the atmosphere had shifted. She was no longer merely the quiet stranger seated among important people. The Alpha King had listened when she spoke. Worse, in the eyes of the court, he had agreed with her. When the final course was cleared, Adrian rose. Every guest followed automatically. Evelyn expected him to dismiss the gathering, but instead he walked around the table and stopped beside her chair. "The hall becomes unbearable after 3 hours of politics," he said. For the first time that evening, there was the faintest trace of humor in his voice. Evelyn smiled before she could stop herself. "Is that a royal confession?" "A closely guarded one." He offered his hand, not commanding, simply waiting. Beyond the tall windows, moonlight silvered the palace gardens. "Walk with me, Evelyn." Her heartbeat stumbled. She looked at his open hand, then at the quiet certainty in his eyes. Slowly, she placed her fingers in his. Somewhere beyond the banquet hall, beneath the ancient branches of Blackthorn's moon garden, the night seemed to be waiting for them. The moon garden was quieter than Evelyn expected. Beyond the palace walls, the distant sounds of the banquet faded beneath the whisper of wind moving through silver-leafed trees. Lanterns hung from curved iron posts, casting warm circles across the stone path. Adrian walked beside her without speaking, and for several moments Evelyn was grateful for the silence. It gave her time to understand the impossible truth that her hand had been resting in the Alpha King's only moments before. Now her fingers felt strangely empty. "You surprised them tonight," Adrian finally said. Evelyn glanced toward him. "By speaking, by refusing to become what they expected." She gave a small, uncertain laugh. "I nearly apologized afterward. I noticed. There was that faint humor again." Evelyn looked down at the path. "Where I come from, speaking at the wrong moment can cost someone more than embarrassment." Adrian's expression changed. The softness remained, but something thoughtful entered his eyes. "And who decided your moments were always wrong?" The question struck deeper than she wanted it to. For years, she had accepted the rules placed around her as though they were walls built by nature itself. Stay quiet. Stay useful. Do not attract attention. Do not inconvenience anyone stronger than you. Evelyn stopped beside a fountain shaped from pale stone. Moonlight trembled across the water. "People who had the power to make me believe them," she said. Adrian stopped too. He did not offer pity. Somehow, she was grateful for that. "Power can make people obey," he said. "It cannot make a lie become truth." Before Evelyn could answer, a soft sound came from behind the hedges. Not danger, a frightened whimper. She turned immediately. Beneath a flowering shrub, a small gray wolf pup crouched beside a broken garden basket, trembling as it stared toward them. One of its paws had become tangled in a loose ribbon from the basket handle. "Easy," Evelyn whispered. Adrian remained several feet away while she knelt. The pup watched her cautiously. Evelyn held out her hand, waiting instead of reaching. "Nobody is going to rush you." Slowly, the pup leaned forward and touched its nose to her fingers. Evelyn smiled. With careful movements, she loosened the ribbon and freed its paw. The pup immediately pressed against her knee as if it had known her for years. Adrian stared at them with an expression she could not read. "What?" she asked. "Nothing." That was clearly something. His gaze moved from the pup to her face. Most people see weakness and immediately try to control it. Evelyn rested her palm gently against the pup's head. Fear becomes worse when somebody decides you should be ashamed of it. Adrian went very still. The words seemed to reach somewhere far beyond the garden. Before Evelyn could wonder why, footsteps approached from the palace. Captain Rowan emerged between the lanterns, his formal expression unusually tense. "Your Majesty." Adrian turned. "What happened?" Rowan hesitated when he noticed Evelyn. "The Western delegation has requested an emergency audience. Lord Varick is with them." Adrian's calm expression hardened slightly. "At this hour?" "They say it concerns the succession council." The pup shifted closer to Evelyn. She felt Adrian's attention return to her. For one strange moment, the king seemed caught between duty and something he was reluctant to leave behind. Then he reached into his coat and removed a small silver crest shaped like a crescent moon. He placed it carefully in Evelyn's palm. "Keep this with you tonight." She stared at the royal seal. "Why?" Adrian looked toward the illuminated palace windows, then back at her. "Because something changed in that hall, Evelyn." His voice dropped. "And not everyone will welcome it." Adrian was gone before Evelyn could find another question. Captain Rowan followed him toward the palace, leaving the garden suddenly too quiet. Evelyn looked down at the silver crest resting in her palm. It was heavier than it appeared, cool against her skin, marked with the crescent symbol of Blackthorn's royal house. The wolf pup nudged her wrist, bringing her attention back to the small life pressed beside her knee. "At least one of us understands what is happening," she murmured. The pup sneezed softly. Evelyn almost smiled. She carried it toward the servants' entrance, planning to find someone who knew where it belonged. But the moment she stepped inside, two attendants stopped speaking. Their eyes dropped immediately to the royal crest in her hand. One bowed. The other stared. Evelyn felt the change at once. Not respect. Fear mixed with curiosity. By the time she reached the east corridor, whispers were already moving faster than she was. The king gave it to her. His personal seal? After one dinner? Evelyn kept walking. She had survived years of cruel words by pretending they could not reach her. Tonight they felt different because every whisper carried Adrian's name with hers. At the turn near the library, Lady Celestine appeared. She stood beneath a row of candlelit portraits, elegant and perfectly composed. "Evelyn." Her voice was pleasant enough to make the warning beneath it colder. Evelyn stopped. "Lady Celestine." Celestine's gaze settled on the silver crest. "You should be careful with symbols you do not understand." Evelyn closed her fingers around it. "The king asked me to keep it." "Exactly." Celestine stepped closer, though her smile never changed. "Blackthorn has rules older than either of us. When the Alpha King gives his private protection seal to an unmarried woman, people notice." Evelyn's heartbeat quickened. Protection is all he called it. Perhaps that is all he intended. Celestine tilted her head. But intention matters less than interpretation at court. The words landed softly, yet Evelyn understood their purpose. Make her afraid. Make her retreat before anyone needed to push. For once, she did not. Then the court may interpret whatever it wishes. Celestine's smile faded slightly. Evelyn surprised herself by continuing. "I spent too many years shaping my life around other people's assumptions. I do not intend to start again tonight." For several seconds, neither woman spoke. Then slow applause sounded from the dark end of the corridor. Lord Varick emerged beside two members of the Western delegation. "Remarkable," he said. "One evening in Blackthorn, and our quiet guest has found a voice." Evelyn's stomach tightened. Varick's eyes went directly to the crest. "May I see that?" "No." The answer came before fear could stop it. His eyebrows lifted. "You misunderstand me." "I understood you clearly." Evelyn's hand remained closed. "His Majesty gave it to me. I will return it only to him." Something passed across Varick's face. Not anger. Calculation. Before he could respond, footsteps approached with measured certainty. Adrian appeared at the far end of the corridor, Captain Rowan beside him. Every conversation died. His gaze traveled from Varick to Celestine, then finally to Evelyn. "Is there a problem?" Varick bowed. "None, Your Majesty. We were merely discussing court customs." Adrian came to Evelyn's side. "Then allow me to clarify one." His voice remained calm. "When I place someone under my protection, no councilman, noble house, or delegation questions her right to stand here." The Western delegates lowered their eyes. Varick said nothing. Adrian looked at Evelyn, and the severity in his face softened. "Come with me." She hesitated only a moment before walking beside him. They had gone perhaps 20 feet when Adrian spoke quietly enough for only her to hear. "You said no to Varric." Evelyn glanced at him. Was that foolish? No, the corner of his mouth lifted. It was overdue. Ahead, the doors of the royal council chamber stood open, and inside waited half the kingdom's most powerful leaders. Adrian slowed before entering. "They asked me tonight who I intend to choose to stand beside the throne." Evelyn's breath caught. He met her eyes. "For the first time in years, I had an answer I was afraid to say aloud." For one suspended heartbeat, Evelyn forgot the council chamber waiting beyond the doors. She heard only Adrian's final words and the quiet uncertainty beneath them. A king who could silence a hall with one sentence was afraid to speak an answer. Somehow, that frightened her more than any court whisper. "Why would you be afraid?" she asked. Adrian looked toward the chamber where voices had begun to fade as the council noticed him waiting outside. Because once a king names what matters to him, the kingdom learns where to press. Evelyn felt the silver crest warm inside her closed hand. She understood then that his protection had never been casual. Neither had his attention. Adrian entered the chamber, and she followed. A long blackwood table stretched beneath a vaulted ceiling painted with constellations. Lords, elders, and delegates stood on both sides. Lord Varric returned to his place without meeting Evelyn's eyes. Lady Celestine remained near the Western representatives, her expression carefully neutral. At the head of the table stood an empty chair beside Adrian's. Evelyn noticed it immediately. So did everyone else. Adrian remained standing. "You requested clarity regarding the succession council." His voice carried easily through the room. "You will have it." An elder from the northern territories cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, tradition requires that the throne have a recognized royal partner before the winter assembly. The Pax need certainty. They need stability," Adrian replied. "Those are not always the same thing." Another councilman glanced toward Evelyn. "And is stability why an outsider now carries your private seal?" The room tightened. Evelyn felt every gaze shift toward her, waiting for embarrassment, fear, perhaps retreat. She remembered Varric asking for the crest. She remembered Celestine warning her about interpretation. Most of all, she remembered Adrian kneeling beside a frightened servant's dropped spoon as though rank had never entered his mind. Evelyn lifted her chin. Adrian answered before anyone else could speak. "She carries it because I gave it to her." "Then what is she to Blackthorn?" Varric asked. Adrian's eyes settled on him. "A guest under my protection." Varric's expression sharpened with satisfaction, as though the answer had ended the matter. Adrian continued, "And the woman I intend to court, if she permits it." Silence fell so completely that Evelyn heard the distant crackle of the fireplace. Her breath caught. He had not claimed her. He had not ordered her. He had placed the choice in her hands before the entire council. That mattered more than she knew how to explain. Adrian turned toward her. The king disappeared from his expression for a moment, leaving only the man from the garden. "Evelyn, you owe me nothing. Not gratitude. Not loyalty. Not an answer tonight." Something inside her chest loosened. All her life, powerful people had spoken about her future as though she were not standing in the room. Adrian had just done the opposite. "But if you are willing," he continued, "I would like the chance to know you without ceremony deciding for us." Evelyn looked around the chamber. Some faces held disbelief. Others held resistance. A few, including Captain Rowan's, carried quiet approval. Lady Celestine watched her with unreadable eyes. This was the moment Evelyn once would have feared most. A room full of powerful people waiting to judge her next breath. Yet she did not feel small. Not anymore. She stepped closer to Adrian and opened her hand. The crescent crest rested on her palm beneath the council lights. "I will keep this tonight," she said softly. Adrian's gaze dropped to the seal, then returned to her face. Evelyn's voice grew steadier. "And tomorrow, you may ask me to walk in the garden again." A faint smile touched his face. "I will." Varric shifted in his chair. "Your Majesty, surely the council deserves more certainty than that." Evelyn turned toward him before Adrian could answer. "Then perhaps the council should learn patience." Captain Rowan lowered his gaze, barely hiding a smile. Adrian did not hide his. And for the first time since Evelyn had entered Blackthorn, the room did not seem to be deciding whether she belonged there. It seemed to be wondering what would happen if she decided that she did. Morning came quietly to Blackthorn. Evelyn woke before the palace bells, the crescent crest still resting on the small table beside her bed where moonlight had left it shining through the night. For several minutes, she simply looked at it. Yesterday, she would have seen a symbol of royal power. Now she saw something else. Choice, trust, a promise that had not been forced into her hands. When she stepped into the corridor, the palace already felt different. Servants greeted her without the nervous curiosity of the night before. Some smiled, others bowed, but not deeply enough to make her uncomfortable. Word had traveled. Of course it had. Blackthorn seemed capable of carrying a rumor faster than wind through pine trees. At the eastern stairs, Captain Rowan waited with an amused expression. His Majesty has been in the moon garden since sunrise. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. That sounds suspiciously like impatience. I would never describe the Alpha King that way. Rowan paused. Not where he could hear me. Evelyn laughed, and the sound surprised her. It had been a long time since laughter came without caution. She found Adrian beside the fountain where they had discovered the frightened pup the night before. The little gray wolf was there again, now proudly carrying a ribbon in its mouth as though the entire garden belonged to it. Adrian glanced toward Evelyn, and something in his face softened immediately. You came. You asked. Technically, you told me I could ask. Then perhaps you should. Adrian considered this with exaggerated seriousness. Evelyn, would you walk with me? She smiled. Yes. They followed the stone path beneath silver leaves bright with morning dew. No council surrounded them. No nobles watched from polished tables. For the first time, Evelyn felt as though they were simply two people walking beneath the same sky. Adrian spoke first. The Western delegation leaves today. Because of last night. Because their negotiations are finished. His gaze shifted toward her, although Lord Varick suddenly remembered several urgent obligations elsewhere. Evelyn tried not to smile. How unfortunate. Tragic. They walked another 20 feet before Adrian stopped near the garden overlook. Below them, blackthorn spread across the valley, roofs glowing gold beneath the rising sun. Beyond the city, forests rolled toward distant mountains. I spent most of my life believing leadership meant never needing anyone, Adrian said. Evelyn listened quietly. My father ruled through certainty. Every answer immediate. Every weakness hidden. I thought strength meant becoming impossible to wound. And now, he looked at her. Now I think strength might be knowing what deserves gentleness. Evelyn felt those words settle somewhere deep. She reached into her coat pocket and removed the crescent crest. Adrian's expression changed when she held it toward him. You are returning it. There was no disappointment in his voice, but she heard the careful restraint beneath it. Evelyn shook her head. I wanted to ask what happens if I keep it longer than one night. Adrian stared at her. The garden seemed to become very still. Then, he said slowly, Blackthorn understands that my protection remains yours. And if I do not need protection? A faint smile touched his face. Then keep it as a reminder that you have a place here anyway. Evelyn closed her fingers around the crest again. That answer mattered. More than any declaration could have. She looked across the valley, remembering every room where she had once made herself smaller, every voice that had taught her to mistake silence for safety. None of those voices followed her here. I think I would like to stay, she said. Adrian did not reach for her. He did not turn the moment into a command or a ceremony. He simply stood beside her, his relief visible in one quiet breath. For how long? Evelyn looked at him and smiled. Long enough to find out what happens next. The palace bells began ringing behind them, deep and bright across the morning air. Below, Blackthorn awakened street by street. Adrian offered his hand. This time Evelyn did not hesitate. She placed her hand in his. Not because a king had chosen her, not because a court had finally noticed her worth, but because she had chosen for herself. And as they walked beneath the silver trees, Evelyn understood something she wished she had learned years ago. Love was not the reward for becoming worthy. Respect was not something the powerful were meant to grant. She had carried her worth with her through every lonely room, every cruel whisper, every moment she had been told to disappear. Adrian had not created it. He had simply been gentle enough to see it. And for the first time, Evelyn saw it too.